Hello, and welcome back to the Very Real Estate Effect, a show focused on real estate investing in Montreal, Quebec. So I'm glad today to have reoccurring guest Leon Caron coming back. We did an episode a couple weeks ago, and today we are here to talk about tenant management. So, hello, Leon, and welcome back.
Hello, and it's so good to be back.
Well, I'm glad you're here. We actually had some good feedback with regards to the episode we did back in December, and now it feels funny to say it was last year, even though it was just a couple of weeks ago. And we had mentioned that you had so much knowledge and really wanted to go a little bit more in depth on certain aspects. And one for today is really like I'll call it the tenant cycle, and how to manage tenants from the initial point of contact to their departure from the unit. So before we actually get into that, like you are the president and owner of Centraux, les Immeubles Centraux, um,
Correct.
property management company here in Montreal. You manage a couple thousand units, and you've been doing this for multiple decades. So you have a plethora of experience. And I just wanted to understand from your perspective, given that you are managing these units and therefore these tenants on behalf of a client, what makes it different in your approach versus an owner operator?
Okay. Well, just to start off, yes, my company is a third-party management company. In addition, I manage and I own my own buildings. So everything that I do and all of my perspective is always wearing two hats,
Mm-hmm.
both of the owner, knowing how every decision impacts your pocket, as well as a third-party manager on behalf of the client.
Yeah.
So, you know, what we do is that we try to um, give experience to the actual property owner. We do this on a daily basis. So, with what we do, we can somewhat anticipate issues right from the get go in order to avoid making any mistakes that can be detrimental in the future.
Sure.
Um, what we do with respect to our guidance is that what I try to do is give a non-personal perspective to my client. Very often clients take things too personally when they're managing on a smaller level. So what we try to do is we try to guide. We try to work with tenants, work with situations where we are in fact educating the tenant, because many tenants don't know the rules and the laws, and we try to create an environment where they understand our perspective. They may not like the answer, but it's a clear, concise answer. So we know the laws, we know what direction we can go, and we
Mm-hmm.
know what direction can enhance a relationship, or certain times, if you take a certain decision, you will degenerate a given situation or relationship between landlord and the tenant.
Mm-hmm. I love what you said with regards to to guide and to educate them, because you're absolutely right. Like a lot of them think they know, but I'm sorry to say it's not always accurate. And so in a lot of cases, it's just about educate them on the law. Here are your responsibilities, here are my responsibilities, and how are we going to work together to make this work. So we create a win-win situation.
That's it. What I do is that when I have a potential client from the get-go, I like to make it very clear that this is what I'm doing for a living. They have to be on board with our philosophy, and there has to be trust. And it's a marriage between property manager and owner. Um, don't tell me how to do the job and expect results when you want to take the path.
Mm-hmm.
So what we try to do is I try to instill a sense of confidence with the client that the perspective or position that we're taking on any given situation is always in their best interest. And what we're doing is looking at the big picture with every decision going on with any tenant, relation, or even repairs or
Mhm.
direction.
Mhm. And taking the angle of the big picture and putting your client's interest first is always the best way to do it, because that's how you, as you said, you instill a good long-term relationship with your client.
Yeah, because really, at the end of the day, as property managers, we are in the trenches.
Yeah.
We are dealing with the property on a day-to-day basis, and I don't want to set up the property to be run in a negative fashion where it's a conflict always between the manager and the tenant, and it's a detriment to the building
Hmm.
because I don't want to manage a building in a way that I'm not comfortable. I
Hmm.
have to believe in the positions we take.
Yeah. Okay, so going now a little bit more into the weeds, if we could just, let's say, pick a situation, and let's imagine a 24 unit that you're managing in Côte des Neiges, and you have two vacant units, and so you've advertised, you're looking for tenants. Can you kind of walk us through the life cycle that you take your tenants through, from that original contact of, hey, we're interested in renting, to signing a lease, to actually them living in it, to then departing, a few years later?
Okay, big question. Big
Yeah.
life cycle here.
Huge question.
Yes, exactly. All
Well,
right,
let's break
so
it down into smaller
all right.
steps.
Okay, so let's say we have these vacant units, and of course we want to rent them. What we have to understand is that from all types of advertisement and whatnot, we deal with tenants showing interest in any given apartment. It could either be coming from online advertisements, street signs, um, or people just walking to the building or seeing a building they like. What it is that the first contact is with the janitor,
Hmm.
because the janitors are the eyes and the ears of the building. And when you're running 24, 25 units, you have a janitor there that's taking care of this aspect. First thing is you have the contact with the tenant, and they want to see the apartment. This is crucial that the apartment must sell itself.
Yes.
You have to have a good product in order to have good success. Because most tenants are educated today. They know what's on the market. They know what they want. They know the area. And what they're doing is that they're comparing your unit to all other units they've seen. It's like buying a car. They're
Hmm.
weighing out the pros and cons to every choice they make. So what we do is that we try to prepare the apartments, and I'm a big proponent into renovating the apartments. I want to make sure my apartment is the best,
Yeah.
so that I can attract the best tenants, get the highest rents, and people see value. So going through our approach, the tenant looks at the apartment, the tenant evaluates whether they're interested in the apartment, and if they do, the next step is they're going for an application. So they do the application, and our perspective, we have certain things that we're looking at. Number one, we trust our superintendent is going to have a good feeling with this applicant. They have to understand that is this somebody that they want to live with in their own building?
Hmm.
Because if you let in a bad egg, a bad tenant, it is the janitor who's going to bear the brunt of the headaches, whether it be noise or rent collection or whatnot. The tenant fills out the application, and from that point on, what happens is that the application comes to the office. And in the office is when we address the application, and we do all of the actual verifications that are required. But getting back to your question, we try to set everything up from our perspective as property managers in order to address all these interactions on a professional basis.
Hmm.
Everything is in writing so that there's no misunderstanding of situations. And this, number one, creates a good start.
Yeah.
So once the tenant is in, if we accept the individual, they pass all of our verifications of
Mhm.
credit, of
So
employment.
do you systematically run both credit check and background check?
Correct. Yes, we do.
Okay.
We do verifications of credit, which is a very big indicator for us.
Yeah.
And as well, when they're working, we verify that the income they stated is correct. We verify where they lived is correct. Contact the owner,
Hmm.
were there issues and whatnot.
Yeah.
So we try to do all of these, all this research in order to see if there are any red flags that come up. How quickly do they need the apartment? Somebody comes in, I need it in 2 days. The first flag is, okay, why? What are you running from? Do I want to inherit a problem? So these are the steps that we take in order to get the individual approved that we accept them moving in.
Hmm.
Going forward, in the life cycle, you have the tenants who are your customers at this point. They're living in the building, and all interaction, we try to make sure that the tenant feels that they're being managed by a professional company. We have the tenants sign the lease, and they have the rules and regulations as per the building, so that everything is very clear, so that there are no surprises later on. Then if we go through the life cycle, you have a tenant that decides to move. That's the back end
Yeah.
of
So
the
let's say
life cycle.
two years later.
Correct. 2 years later, when somebody chooses to move out, which every landlord is going to deal with, what we do is that we have to have proper and clear interaction with the tenant. We want the tenant to understand that we need to have access to the building, to the unit. We need to take inventory of the state of the apartment in order to plan for work that's involved, prepare the apartment, as well as we have to plan visits with potential tenants, which is something which is very important that we have access, because we need cooperation with the tenants. So in order to ensure a smooth exchange, it's crucial that the tenant understands this, because at this point of the game, the tenant looks at the apartment that it's their apartment. But from a manager's perspective or an owner, all of a sudden the dynamics change, because we are looking at this place as our future investment. Now what we do is that we have to market the place, we have to have access, and it's very key to have a good relationship with the tenant at this point, because if you have conflict, it's going to be very troublesome to get new people to come look at the apartment. Then once we go through the life cycle, July 1st is a very big moving month, for example. I'll use the July 1st period. What we do is that with good relations, we have people that are moving out and moving in. There's a lot of stress for both parties, because everybody wants to move in and move out on the 1st.
Same day.
And the same day, and people have their moving trucks, they're moving people. Not everybody can get the truck at 7 a.m. on the 1st or the 31st by 8 p.m. And in the meantime, you have to do renovations or painting or prepping of the apartment before the new one comes in. So it's very stressful. And it's at that point where you really recognize the value of experience, because you have to ensure that there's a calm transition between old and new, and that everybody has the most positive experience through this whole operation.
Yeah.
And that is pretty much the whole cycle. Because at the same time, we as owners, we have to prepare the unit.
Yeah.
We have to paint it. We have to make sure that the new tenant has a good experience coming in. Because if they don't like the preparation of the apartment, it's all negative from the start.
Yeah. Well, you said so many things I'd love to dive into a little bit more and unpack, but it seems like there's a reoccurring theme is that you really strive to instill, I was going to say, a positive environment and a good communication. And being a third party in a way, maybe it makes it even easier because there's nothing personal about this. It's a transaction. You pay to live here. I will give you the best possible service, but let's kind of remove the feelings part, even though it's touchy, because we see it as owner, we see it as an investment, and for the people, that's their house, that's where they live. So there is a little bit more of an emotional attachment for them.
Yes, that is a very important point, and that is where we come in. This is our strong points, because we run the building in a professional manner,
Mm-hmm.
not personal. Um, Many private owners, it's something they don't do every day. They've invested a lot of money and they become too personal, and all of their decisions are based on a personal basis.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Landlords are seen as rich entities, whether it's true or not. Um, and many landlords, in discussions with tenants, it's important that they choose their words carefully, that they discuss things with the tenants, and they don't try to manipulate the tenants with their own headaches. They need a new toilet, and the owner is being a little petty and saying it's good enough for you. It's good. Tenants don't like that.
Mm-hmm.
Landlords can't complain. Oh, the taxes are so high, or I have to do this. It's not the tenants'
Yeah, it's got nothing
problem.
to do with them.
No. So
Mm-hmm.
from our perspective, what we do is that we take out that personal perspective.
Yeah.
I let the owner vent all of his frustrations or headaches to me.
Mm-hmm.
After he's done venting, I say, okay, are you done?
Yeah.
Very good. Now, what are we going to do?
Let's move
Okay.
on.
Because this is your obligation.
Yeah.
You like to collect rent. It's all good. You want high rents, but you have to deliver on your
Mm-hmm.
end because you're running a business.
Yeah. And so, as you mentioned a little bit of the tenant screening process, and maybe we'll go a little bit more into it in detail from your perspective. But two things I wanted to share, because it literally happened last week, is that we have a vacant unit right now that we're trying to rent. It's a nice 3-bedroom, freshly renovated, and it's out on the market. We had some interest, and our first step is to obviously have a phone conversation and requalify them. How many people? Reconfirm the rent, how many bedrooms? Yes, it's on the second floor, and so on and so forth. And by the time we got to the application, I always call the references, and I find the best reference isn't the current landlord, but it's the previous one, the one who's got nothing, no skin in the game, whether you take that tenant or not, because he's already moved out of their place. And
Correct.
what happened with this gentleman is that when I mentioned his name, so the previous owner just kind of paused and said, "Oh, yeah, I remember him." Anyways, and he gave me a little bit of a recollection of how it had happened for him, and it had an impact because uh, he's an owner operator. We actually ended up spending about 15 minutes on the phone together, and he made it quite clear about how their situation ended and whether that was the type of tenant I was looking for. And so, not having the current landlord, but the previous one has to me has always been the a good revelation of what it's really like. Because again, if the tenant isn't very good, the current owner is going to say, yes, he's fantastic, so he can get rid of him.
Yeah. Look, that's all in the first initial process with the application, and what we're doing is we're putting a puzzle together, and we're trying to put all the pieces together to determine the personality traits of this one applicant. Does he respect his obligations? Day one, everybody looks great. Everyone's putting on the best game face. So what you have to do is navigate.
Mm-hmm.
Look for the red flags.
Yeah.
You have to look at their interest in the apartment. Are they running away from something? How is their handwriting on the application? Is it completely filled out? Because there's nothing better than getting an application that's complete and full. Because when you get an empty one, you start questioning, okay, what are they hiding?
Correct.
Like in your case, you dug deep. And it's things that we do. We check with the rental board on the site to see, are there any actions that were taken by any party? Is this some tenants? The reality is that they look for problems. A problem that they can find works in their favor with the laws that we have. Do you want to get into a relationship like this? Or do you want to have somebody that there's respect both ways?
Hmm.
And this is what you have to do in order to validate a given applicant.
Yeah. And really look at patterns. In the case, in the story that I was just sharing, they had moved, I think, to 3 apartments within a 1 year period. To me, that's a major red flag.
Oh, big time.
Yeah. And as you said, like, and that's, I've learned that the hard way is, first of all, the tenants that they want to move in right away, like next week. Like, I was like, as you said, like, well, what's the problem where you're currently living? Are you being kicked out? Or, tell me more about that. Oh, my landlord is an idiot and this and that. And it's like, oh, really? Interesting. And so I always take note of how they talk about and treat their current landlord before moving in with me, because I always think, if you're going to do it to him, you're going to do it to me.
Exactly.
Oh,
That's it. It's you try to stack everything in your favor that you're making an informative choice.
yeah. Yeah. And so for the tenant screening process, like one tool that's actually helped us a lot, we use the forms from La Corpic, and they actually have well, two systems, one to actually collect and send out the application form, and another one to run the background check. And you can check out, you can select various packages on how thorough you want it to be, and verify the work references and so on and so forth. But that $25 investment, which I always make them pay for, of course, has saved us quite a few headaches over time. And I didn't realize at the beginning how important is a proper screening, because if you do it properly, you will save yourself so much headache in the future.
Yeah, that's correct. Like, Corpic is the #1 landlords association in the province,
Mm-hmm.
and we work with them. We're un fournisseur, so we have good relations with Corpic. We use their Equifax, which we
Yeah.
do the credit checks,
Mm-hmm.
and we do a lot of calls on our own. We do the credit checks through them, but we like to speak to the landlords ourselves.
Yeah.
So I think instead of the $25 fee, it's like a $13 fee,
Yeah.
and we do the legwork in-house.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So you do the credit check, because that you can't really do on your own, but then you just take the application and you call every single reference they've provided you.
Yeah, exactly. We
Okay.
we like to get a feel, like
Mm-hmm.
you did. You spoke to the landlord yourself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it makes a big difference, and that's also how you can make great people. And I'm always in prospecting mode, so at the end of the conversation I was like, well, do you have a building you'd like to sell by any chance?
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, why not? In this case he didn't, but you
Yeah.
never know. So going back to the owner and operator, which is a little bit of a different situation than you, even though, as you said, you're an investor yourself, and you hold your properties and manage them yourself. What kind of advice would you give to, a small operator, let's say 5 or 10 units, on how to establish a positive environment versus starting on a conflictual basis? Because it's, as we mentioned just a bit ago, it's sometimes quite a loaded topic, and the perception of, like, oh, my landlord, he's a rich prick, and his expectations are unrealistic, and he won't do any maintenance, and so on and so forth. And so how do you establish a positive relationship with your tenants from day one?
Okay. The key thing you said, a building with 5 to 10 units. So that is more of a smaller building.
Mm-hmm.
So, in answering towards that size of a building, tenants live pretty close to one another. So what you try to do, especially what we try to do in buildings of that size, #1, like I mentioned before, everything is on a professional basis. And when we choose our tenants, of course, we try to choose the best tenants we can, because they're living in a small environment, and they're interacting very closely with the other tenants. So we try to create somewhat of a family environment in a smaller building of that size. But in order to get to that point, it's very important to recognize that it's your product that delivers you success. If you have a product, an apartment that is in the best of conditions, what you do is that you get the people that appreciate and respect it. If you have an apartment that it's an apartment that's been managed with band-aids, and you've done all of these repairs that are not long-term solutions, you're going to have a tenant that's going to be getting frustrated very easily because he doesn't respect your way of doing things. So if you run it in a professional fashion, you take a long-term approach, you're delivering an environment which is conducive for positivity. And what we try to do with the tenants is that the rules and the regulations of the building are a key factor, which every tenant signs. So we're laying out the rules from the start.
Mhm.
We're putting the guidelines in place. We are selecting the best tenants we can find. So hopefully the people who are renting our apartments, paying us from their pocket, earn money every month, they're getting value in their product. It's like any person going to a hotel. They want to have a good experience. Over here, this is an apartment. It's their place, and they are living there, and it's a very personal decision. A
Mhm.
landlord has to respect that. A landlord's looking at it on a business level. Am I going to spend $1,000 towards a new counter and cabinet? It may be rotten, and the tenant may be valid with his complaint. If you don't recognize that, you're going to create a difficult environment which creates conflict.
Yeah. And that conflict to me is to be avoided. I wouldn't say at all costs. I mean, there's certain personalities where that's what they're looking for, and you have to go through it. But in the past, I've noticed, and it also depends on the unit. This was a unit that was more on the upper end, and I always started with a little gift. I had a welcome bottle of wine and a little card, and I've noticed that every single time I did that, we actually created a much better working environment. And at the same time, and that's the caveat, is that the clientele coming in was already usually, more educated and working professionals, and it was kind of a different relationship.
Yeah, that's it. All these little things do in fact build a respectful relationship between both parties.
Hmm.
What you're talking about, a little gift, certainly that goes a long way. What we do is that during the Christmas season, we send poinsettias to our tenants.
Hmm.
So at the end of December, they're getting a poinsettia. It's just showing, it's just whether you want to call it an olive branch, or it's just reaffirming our appreciation of them working with us.
Yeah.
It goes a long way
Hmm.
at the end of December,
Yeah.
especially when January increases are coming in.
I
So
was gonna say the timing is also quite crucial
yeah,
in swallowing the pill of rent increases. But you're absolutely right that sending a little gift, like this year we didn't do flowers, we did wine or beer, and I kind of have like a profile of who likes what.
yeah.
But just drop off a really nice big bottle of beer with a little card, and just have a good year. I find it just goes such a long way. And I mean, it's expensed. It's not about the time or the cost. It's about taking the step to do this.
It's just an initiative that you didn't have to take. You're
Hmm.
choosing to do what you're doing, which goes a long way.
Yeah, yeah. Now, a lot of the things that we've talked about to me always connects to soft skills, because real estate is an absolute people business. And in handling tenants, I've noticed that there are certain personalities, and I have some friends of mine who just would be incapable of doing that, and they've told me themselves, just because in a way they're too, well, I would say too rigid, or too. It's not even a question of being strict, because you can be strict and still be nice. It's just, what kind of soft skills do you think someone needs in order to succeed in doing this?
Um, Number one, when you get into this business, you have to have thick skin. You have to have a clear understanding of what you're getting into. And this is a situation where you have to understand the tenant's perspective. You have to be able to understand through their eyes what they see, what they're dealing with the owner of the building they're paying rent for. Um, that is so crucial, that you understand that it's a business for you and it's personal for them. And it's a very fine line because all your decisions are being based on money. And for them, they know that they are paying money and all they're looking at is for results. Results to know that the apartment that I'm living in, I am getting what I paid for. This is where I live. This is where my kids are raised. And I want to have a functioning apartment. And that goes back to delivering an amazing product. Because when a tenant has faulty taps, leaky taps, a leaking toilet, a counter that's damaged, they may accept it at the beginning, but it's going to fester issues down the road. So anybody getting into this business has to recognize what they're starting with, what their product is all about. And through the whole process and life cycle of dealing with the tenants, getting back to your question, the personality traits an owner must have is that he has to have patience, he has to have respect, and he has to have the capacity of not taking things personally. Because it's a personal thing, an issue for the tenant. But the landlord cannot get defensive, and the landlord has to be transparent, recognize the issues a tenant may have at any given time, and do not get into a war with a tenant who has a valid issue. And the person who owns the building, who's collecting the rent, has to be able to validate and be fair.
Yeah.
That's with anything.
Yeah. And I totally agree with you. And I would even add maybe on top of that is also compassion, because yes, we come from different perspectives, but at the end of the day, he or she is your client, and you do have to listen. Doesn't mean you have to agree with them, but just to show a little bit of compassion goes a long way. And as you were saying that on the communication front, I just had a little memory that came back up, and now I literally share this with every new tenant coming in is, please, like, one of your responsibilities is to let me know if anything breaks or changes in the unit, because there's nothing worse than, the kind of the angry phone call of, this hasn't been working and it's been 3 months. It's like, but this is the first time you tell me about it. I'm more than happy to come and fix it, but if you don't tell me, I can't do it. And so instilling a good communication to really make sure that things get addressed right away, because as you said, at the beginning maybe they'll take it, but then it's never good. It's never good. It runs the relationship.
Yeah, you have to be responsible. Of course, tenant, if there's an issue, it's their obligation to bring it to your attention. Day one, not wait 5 months and be all frustrated. But then from that point, it's up to the landlord to react, and you have to do the right thing. Yes, you can say you have to be compassionate, but the way I try to look at it, you have to be a big boy. You have to do what has to be done for the apartment.
Yeah.
Every landlord knows deep inside their philosophy of running an apartment. Of course, everybody wants more rent. You can't rent an apartment at a certain price point, and then the tenant's complaining with, there's air coming in around the windows, it's cold, it's not enough heat, the hot water is not functioning, and you can't get frustrated with it, because it's your obligation to make sure that things are running well. And that's where I come back to. You got to start the relationship from a strong perspective. You have to show that you have a good product, so that you can look at the tenant. And what I like to do is, when I do, let's say, interviews, or when I speak to tenants who have an issue, or I go to an apartment, I'm able to look at them in the face and say, look at what we do around the building. We're spending money, we're enhancing. I'm not running away from repairs. I understand this is what you want, but you have to understand, I'm not going to spend this type of money to improve your counters or it's not feasible. I can't do it. So you get respect from being honest.
Yeah.
And if you have a good apartment building that's well maintained, you have some credibility. You can look at the tenant and say, look at what I'm doing. I am not a, absentee owner. I am an active professional who is taking care of things. And now we're gonna get through this, but I'm gonna
Mhm.
tell you the scope of which I'm gonna dive into.
Yeah. I love what you said about, it always comes down to having a good product. And I was almost going to add on top of that is having a good product, letting them know that you know about it and that you want to maintain it. And because one thing I find that goes a long way is that whenever we take in new tenants, we tell them kind of all the work we've done, let's say in the last year. Oh, maybe not in this unit, but next door we've changed 3 units, we've changed 3 windows, excuse me, we've changed 2 doors, so on and so forth. Or next year we're planning on redoing the roof. Right now we have a building, we're gonna have to do some foundation work and redo the stone facade in around May, June. That's some heavy work, and we are already letting the current tenants know that, hey, in a couple of months expect this work, but it's important for us to do it because we really want to maintain this building and give it the love and care it deserves, and we want to let you know in advance. So having that open and clear communication really goes a long way. And also for the expectations, because we redid the roof recently, and when I had to tell 2 tenants, sorry, for a week you're not going to be able to park here, one of them was kind of up in arms, and I explained, this is a once in a 20-year event. So if you can't park in your spot for a week out of 20 years because we're redoing the roof, I think you can understand my situation. And the guy was like, yeah, yeah, okay. And in the end, he thanked me for redoing the roof. So um, it was just a funny example. And I'd like to finish because I'm sure over the last 20 or 30 years, you also have some horror stories. And I would love to hear 1 or 2 of them because I bet yours go quite wild. So, is there a difficult, maybe 1 or 2 difficult experience that you've had in handling tenants, and now looking back with your experience, like if there's anything you would do differently?
Huh. Uh, like I say this often to people, I should write a book one day about the different experiences I've had and interactions with tenants. But the one problem I would have is that people wouldn't believe it. You know, because we here in Quebec, we live in an environment where uh, the laws are very pro-tenant, uh, and it's a fine line in order to deal with tenants. And there's so much that we have at risk, and there's so much that we have involved, um, and on a daily basis, we're making decisions based on that. Do we do something? Do we not? We're getting requests that every time the phone rings, it could be another different request that nothing's the same. No individual has the same life or problems that another one does. One case we had in my own building. I have a building of 45 units, and we had this elderly couple, husband and wife, that lived in the building, and the wife died. And she was not really all there, so to speak. She later on in age didn't recognize family, kids were involved in, I guess, guiding her and whatnot.
Mhm.
And the boyfriend or the husband was also being cared for by these kids. And I knew from my experience that this here was not a good situation, because I have really a sick man who's living now by himself, not able to take care of himself. And there were red flags all across the board. But when you have the family calling you and asking you, yes, we want our father to remain in the building. There's no place for him to go. There's no social housing for him or cared living.
Mhm.
He had people, CLSC people, coming to help them out and whatnot. But I knew that this was somewhat of a disaster. Like I knew. But when you start to speak to the family and they're very sympathetic and they try to appeal to you, you stop thinking with your head and you're starting to think more with your heart, and you want to do the right thing. You want to be a good person. So in this one case, you said, okay, we'll let him remain, but you have to be involved. And yes, I got promises across the board from everybody. Relations were all wonderful. Sure enough, this one individual, like I said, he was not a well man really, and he would collect furniture from outside and hoard it in his apartment, and he brought in bed bugs. So if anybody knows anything about bed bugs, this is the worst.
It's a nightmare.
To fight. Forget cockroaches, forget rats, mice. Bed bugs are the worst because they spread and the treatment is expensive. It can be like about $700 an apartment, and then you have to do the surrounding ones. But the most important part is getting the cooperation with the tenant. And we had somebody that didn't recognize or understand his obligations of putting things in bags, cleaning up, stop to bring furniture inside, your bed is infested. So we're dealing with somebody that was not capable of taking care of himself. I was put in this position, one which I didn't want to be put in, and all of a sudden the family is not there the way they should have been.
Yeah.
And it creates such a crazy environment because we have to follow the laws, and then you have a tenant that's really not, healthy.
Not fully there.
Yeah, and you're having to protect your building, having to protect the other tenants. You're having to, deal with this issue, and it's very frustrating.
I can imagine that is a difficult.
You try to do the good thing, and at the end of the day, you're paying the price, and you have surrounding tenants that are getting bed bugs, and then they look to you. Yeah. And you're the one bearing the brunt of the frustration of everybody, and it's a miserable road to go down.
Yeah. And as you said, now the family is looking at you as in, well, what are you going to do about it? But
everything, I was the bad one at the end of the day, because everything I need to do, and I want to be proactive. I had the family when they wanted something from me, they were on their best behavior. And now when I needed a lot from them, support, wow, did relations break down?
Yeah.
Gone. And it's just, it's almost like it just cut my losses. I just have to turn the page on this chapter.
That's actually an excellent example at many different levels of the human experience that you go through being a landlord and managing tenants like that. Because as you said, it's a collection of small things that when put together actually creates a very big, a much bigger and more problematic situation that you were originally anticipate.
Yeah, and the thing is that as a landlord, it's almost as if you're dealing with schoolyard kids at school, because you're in the middle. You have an obligation to provide peaceful enjoyment of a premises for any given tenant. And if you want another story, I can tell you something between two tenants, where I had a tenant living downstairs on the first floor. Second floor apartment was a lady living with her handicapped son, who was hyperactive, running up and down the hallway, like at all hours. And the problem comes to me. I am the one as a landlord to react on the complaints from the tenant below. And you're dealing with a very, you try to be sympathetic, child's handicapped, but yet the disruption to the tenant below is tremendous.
Yeah.
And what I had to do is I had to make an application at the rental board for eviction of this one lady, single mother living with a handicapped child. Yeah. It's not something you want to do, but it's your obligation. And we ended up going to the rental board, and I had the tenant there, and I was in the middle. Yeah. I'm it's almost like you're not a winner on either side, but you're dealing with two tenants that are at war with one another, and you have to be mediator. And the only way to do that is to prove to the judge that the person down below is in fact suffering. And that tenant, he said, the noise is so loud, he took off his shoe in the court and he banged it on the table.
Wow.
In the court. He says, that's what I hear every night. So really, this is just one situation where you're in a very, very difficult predicament. You try to do the right thing, but you have to be able to understand what your role is.
Yeah, and those people situations can be quite touchy.
It is because you have these are personalities,
Mhm.
and whether it's loud music from one tenant to the other, noise from kids running down the hallways at all hours of the night, or somebody that's walking above another tenant in high heel shoes on hardwood floors that wakes up at 4 in the morning to go to work, uh, you're depending that the person's going to realize that, yeah, walking in high heels on hardwood floors in a wood structure building is going to create a problem to
Yeah.
others.
Yeah. And for so many situations, it's sometimes a bit difficult because we feel like it's such common sense. Like, why are we even having this conversation? But here you are, as you said, between two tenants having to explain when you do this, it wakes up your neighbor. Please be mindful of that.
Yeah, and that comes back to when you asked about personality traits. You have to be a little bit of a manipulator.
Hmm.
You have to understand everyone's perspective, and you have to try to attain a win-win situation for both parties
Yeah.
in all interaction. So you try to be a mediator because you can't be a hard ass and expect people are going to respond positively. You
Hmm.
have to say, you have to, why I said at the beginning, you have to have thick skin because you may not like what you hear. You may not like what you may need to say to make the other party happy, but you got to understand the end game. You got to say the right things in order to satisfy the person because that's what they want to hear, whether it's right or wrong. You got to be able to calm the situation, understand their perspective, understand their limitations, because maybe they just don't have the capacity to understand that they have to be respectful.
Yeah.
So you got to play the game and understand, and be a psychologist in a way to know how to get your message to every individual.
Hmm. And that's a very good note for the end, how to get your message across to everyone. Leon, thank you very much for the insights again today. I feel like you've dropped us a few gold nuggets there of knowledge for anyone looking to improve their tenant management skills.
Look, I love sharing it. Um, there's so much experience that comes by being in this business because you deal with so many personalities. It's nice to share. It's nice to hear somebody that finds it interesting because, as you know, we're very passionate about what we do.
Yeah.
And if you're passionate about something, you like to share the successes you have,
Hmm.
and you don't appreciate the successes if you don't go through all the obstacles in order to get there.
Yeah. If you don't go through the steps yourself.
Correct.
Leon, thank you very much again for today. It's been a real pleasure having you, and who knows, maybe we'll do another one later on another topic. It would be
Anytime,
it would be a
anytime,
pleasure.
Axel. I'm up to the challenge.
Sounds good. I'll keep that in mind.
All
And
right.
thank you to all of you for listening in today. As always, I'm always interested in your feedback. If you have any comments, if you'd like to support the show, please subscribe, leave us a rating, and send me some comments. And we will see you next week. So thank you very much to everyone. Have a wonderful day.